Welcome to the Build Your Reiki Business podcast. I'm Christian of Standing Stones Healing, founder of the Reiki Business Collective and creator of the Build Your Reiki Business program, sending blessings and best wishes to your Reiki business. Greetings, welcome, and thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Build Your Reiki Business podcast. I'm Christian of Standing Stones Healing, and so honored and excited to have you here as always, so thank you. In this week's episode, we're talking about defining your ideal client. And this is a common question that comes up in which people are wondering who their ideal client is, how to determine that. And we may also often hear this phrased as, what is your niche? What is your niche? Or your niche, depending upon the way that you might say it. So there's a lot to say on this topic, and the first thing that I really want to encourage is that there is indeed a lot of pressure to define your ideal client, and there is a lot of pressure to define your niche. Now, some of this pressure is founded, and so some of this pressure is good pressure and is good guidance to determine your ideal client and define your niche. However, oftentimes this encouragement, indeed this pressure, can do more harm than good, because here we are saying, oh no, I want to start a Reiki business, but first I need to define my ideal client. Oh no, I can't start my business yet because I have not picked my niche. And so this kind of question and this kind of pressure can often stop us from starting and can often paralyze us from moving forward in our Reiki business, and can prohibit us from moving forward. So the first thing that I want to do is to encourage you that if you don't have an ideal client, if you don't have a niche, it's okay. Do not let that stop you from starting a Reiki business, and do not let that stop you from moving forward in your Reiki business, because here's why. So often when it comes to defining our ideal client, or if we want to talk about it in terms of choosing a niche, so often this is the kind of thing that comes from doing rather than from thinking. So often on our Reiki business journey and on our life journey itself, we think that if we sit and think for long enough, the answers will come to us. And that if we sit and think long enough, that we'll have clarity on what it is that we want, or what our ideal client is, what our niche is. But actually, more often than not in life and in Reiki business, clarity comes from doing. When we take action, we gain awareness from that action. And when we reflect upon that action, that helps us to gain greater awareness and move forward with better and more aligned action. So what that means is that if you don't know what your niche is, oftentimes sitting down and really thinking about it isn't the best course of action. Can this help? Yes, of course it can. Reflection is always a good thing, but it can often serve to stop us before we get started. And so when it comes to choosing your ideal client or defining your ideal client, I want to put the focus on the defining rather than on choosing. And so what that means is that I first want to encourage us to just get out there and offer Reiki, if that is your intended Reiki business model. Of course, you can have a Reiki business that does not offer Reiki sessions at all. But to really get yourself out there with your Reiki sessions or your products, if your Reiki business focuses on selling Reiki products, to just get the stuff out there. to get your sessions out there, to talk to family, talk to friends, get the word out, and to start the doing. So, to start, for instance, seeing clients in whatever way, shape, or form that might be, and that might look in your Reiki business, but to do that first before sitting down and saying, well, first I have to figure out who my ideal client is. Now, in some cases, yes, this is a little bit more important than in others. I'll talk about that in a minute. But when it comes to defining our ideal client, oftentimes our ideal client is something that is defined and refined through our Reiki business. I also want to encourage you to be open to the unfolding and the evolution of what that means for you as well in terms of who your ideal client is. So allow it to develop naturally and allow it to unfold, and know that it can and often will shift as well along your own Reiki business journey. So, for instance, my niche or my ideal client was someone who was going through, or I should say, is also still someone who is going through a life change or transition and looking for support with that. Now, this actually came from my years of experience as a career coach. So before I started my Reiki business, well, and while I had my Reiki business too, I was a career coach. And so, of course, I was helping a lot of people through a transition in terms of their career. And I found certain things that were common with these clients and their life experience with that transition. I then specifically went on to work in career coaching in the higher education realm, and really gravitated towards the students who were entering college and the students who were exiting college. So, first year students and graduating students. I really gravitated towards those students and that major life transition that they were going through. And so, of course, as I am in my Reiki practice, I am seeing clients who are coming to me for things like, oh, I've just lost my job, or I want to change jobs, or I've just gone through a breakup. And it was natural for me to be working with those kinds of clients in those life changes because I'd been doing it for years as a career coach, and because I was naturally gravitating to that in my career coaching. And so it really just kind of blossomed in that way to where my ideal client was someone experiencing a life change or transition. And then after a few more years, I realized, actually, the majority of my clients, and of course, there are always exceptions, but many of my clients are coming to me wanting to make career changes, wanting to make changes with their own business, including their Reiki business, or to start their own business. And so my ideal client now is, yes, still the person going through transition, but it's been refined to realize, most of my clients are having the same kinds of experiences. At least that's who is coming to me by and large. And so my ideal client has been refined even further. Now, as our Reiki business journey develops and unfolds, you will probably find this in your Reiki business as well. Now, here's the thing though, is that when it comes to defining our ideal client, and particularly this pressure to define our niche, I talk a lot about this in the Build Your Reiki Business program. But when we talk about niching down and getting really refined on our niche, this is more important with an online component of our Reiki business than it is with an in-person component. Because so often when we have an in-person practice, our niche or our ideal client is defined by geography. And so our ideal client is within a certain radius around where we are located in person with our practice. So this is often the case. And so often when we have an in-person component to our Reiki business, or our business is strictly in person, our niche is already defined. It is a geographic radius around us in which people are willing to drive to us for a Reiki session. And that might be 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, even a couple of hours, depending upon your location. And so there you have it. Right there is a niche already. And right there even is an ideal client. Of course, you can refine that further and say, well, my ideal client is within an hour's drive from my office location and is suffering from insomnia. Okay, you can indeed put your focus on people who are experiencing insomnia. And depending upon where you live in the world, there might not be a whole heck of a lot of clients who fit that ideal client framework that you have. And so therein is the encouragement to not worry so much about that ideal client, especially when you are first starting out in your Reiki business. And oftentimes that ideal client will reveal themselves. For instance, most of my clients are Reiki practitioners themselves, at least for the online component of my Reiki business. And so what that means is that I did not envision when I started my Reiki business that my ideal client would be a Reiki practitioner. But it has unfolded and developed and just so happened to blossom in that kind of way. Now, for the in-person component of my Reiki business, that's different. My in-person component, my ideal client is within half an hour or 30 minutes of me. Does that change? Yes, of course, absolutely it does. But way different from the online component of my Reiki business. So what that means is, please do not put so much pressure on yourself to define your ideal client. Please do not put so much pressure on yourself to know how old they are. Or, we hear so often, your client avatar. What is your client avatar? We need to know their age, and we need to know their gender identity, and we need to know where they live in the world, and what their income is, and what they ate for breakfast. We can get really specific about that. And like I mentioned, the Build Your Reiki Business program offers a lot of thought on that and some exercises for you to get you thinking about who your ideal client is. But indeed, and of course, in that program, I encourage you, just like I'm encouraging you here, to allow space to let it develop and unfold. One of the mistakes, I don't want to even call it a mistake. Scratch that. It's not a mistake because it's part of the journey and part of the process. But one of the things that often happens with newer Reiki practitioners, and I've seen this again and again, is that they'll feel that pressure to define an ideal client, to define a niche. And, maybe they've received some business coaching and the business coach has said, you have to define your niche. And so they rush and they do that right away, before they've really gotten started on offering sessions and getting a feel for themselves as a practitioner. And they'll do the thing that they're supposed to do, which is define that ideal client, define that niche, and they'll jump right in. And then they're kind of like, what do I do now? And they will cater to that ideal client for, like a month, and then they'll abandon it for another niche, another ideal client. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, and that's just part of that trial and error unfolding process. So it's not in and of itself a mistake. But what is unfortunate is that they have felt that pressure to pick something, and they've picked something, and they've gone with it for like a month, and then they're like, I don't really know if this is the niche that I want to cater to. I don't know if the ideal client that I have in mind is really my own ideal client. So then they switch and do something else. And then they seem maybe a little bit kind of, I don't want to use the term flaky, but they're doing this, and then they're switching and doing that, and switching and doing this. And again, absolutely, that's a part of the Reiki business journey. Absolutely, there is room and space for that. And at the same time, we don't want to be switching up our ideal client and our niche so frequently that people are looking at us and saying, oh, well, last month you were doing this and you were catering to clients, people suffering from insomnia. And now this month, you've switched that up and you're focusing in on animals and offering Reiki to animals. What's it going to be next month? So just be aware of that, and just know that it's okay to hold off on really defining who your client is and getting really specific on that niche and just allowing it to unfold and develop. Get out there and offer Reiki and see if there are patterns to people who are coming to you. See if there are patterns to what people are experiencing in their sessions and what you are able to do for them and the ways in which you are able to help. In my own Reiki business, I have a lot of experience outside of my Reiki business with helping people through life transitions and helping people to navigate those transitions. And so that is something that really came naturally to me in my Reiki business because I was doing it outside of my Reiki business for years and then noticed that it was something that was happening within my Reiki business as well. Now, of course, on my Reiki business journey that is always unfolding, not only is my ideal client a Reiki practitioner, but in the unfolding of my Reiki business, my ideal client is now a Reiki practitioner who is starting a Reiki business. Because that was something that I saw coming up again and again and again in my own Reiki sessions. And so that unfolded and developed naturally in my Reiki business journey. So I encourage you to allow that to develop and unfold naturally in your own Reiki business journey. Really, you cannot mess it up. So even that Reiki practitioner who is 1 month helping people with insomnia and the next month focusing on animals and, the next month focusing on something else, even that person is not messing it up because that's part of the unfolding of their own Reiki business journey. So let's give ourselves some grace. Let's give ourselves some room to experiment. Let's give ourselves some room to define that ideal client. Now, again, that image of the ideal client and that idea of niching down is more important in the online world, and yet still it's okay for that to take a little bit of time to unfold and develop as well. Get yourself some practice. Get yourself an identity as a business owner and as a Reiki business owner, and just allow yourself to feel into that and allow that to unfold around you. It will. So there's no rush to figure out who your ideal client is. Take a breath, give yourself a break, and know that it will naturally unfold as your Reiki business journey unfolds. So I'm sending lots of blessings to relieving that pressure of defining your niche, of allowing you the space to say, yeah, it's okay to take a break and a breather and to just feel into that and to allow that to unfold and develop. And that's okay. You're allowed to experiment and you're allowed to try things out. You're allowed to try on an ideal client for size and see how that feels. But more importantly, I think you're allowed to just allow it to develop and see what unfolds as you offer sessions, as you offer products, as you do your own Reiki business. All of those things will unfold and develop just in the way our own Reiki journey unfolds and develops. You know, my own personal Reiki practice looks different now from what it did 9 years ago, 8 years ago. And it will look different still in 9 years, 8 years, 10, 20 years. My Reiki business journey looks different now from what it did 2, 3, 5 years ago. And it will look different in 2, 3, 5, 10, 20 years from now. And so that is all okay. And that is all part of the journey and the experience. So let's release judgment of ourselves for not knowing exactly who our ideal client is right away. And oh my gosh, do they eat oatmeal or donuts for breakfast? And what kind of car do they drive? And what's their favorite color? And what kind of music do they listen to? Yes, we can do all of those exercises, but perhaps even better than defining who our ideal client is maybe letting our ideal client define themselves for us. Being open, listening, paying attention, and see who comes to us, why they're coming to us, and how we can help and serve them. So I'm sending so many blessings to you for allowing your own ideal client to present themselves to you, for allowing that to unfold, for testing it out, trying it on, maybe multiple times to see what develops, and knowing that it is an unfolding, that it will develop naturally, and to allow it to continue to unfold as well. So I'm sending so many blessings and best wishes to your own Reiki business journey. As I mentioned, the Build Your Reiki Business program. Yes, we talk all about this in the Build Your Reiki Business program. You can learn more about the Build Your Reiki Business program at standingstoneshealing.com/build. It is indeed a very comprehensive Reiki business program discussing this and a whole lot of other very important Reiki business information. And of course, as always, you can get the free Reiki Biz Kit at standingstoneshealing.com/Reiki Biz Kit. There might be some discussion in the FAQ about ideal client stuff. Honestly, I can't remember. But I think there's like 16 FAQs in the FAQ section. So probably at some point there is something about ideal client stuff. Well, sending so many blessings and best wishes for your Reiki business. Thanks for tuning in to the Build Your Reiki Business podcast. Please like, share, subscribe, and send to a friend. Learn more about the Build Your Reiki Business program at standingstoneshealing.com/build. Sending blessings and best wishes to your Reiki business.